Are you pleading guilty because you are guilty?
Yes.
And Mr. Kohberger, you understand that by entering the guilty plea in this case, you would be giving up your right to appeal any decision this court made, as well as your sentence.
Yes.
Let's talk about what's trending in true crime, shall we? There is brand new video footage of Bryan Kohberger's movements just hours after he murdered those 4 University of Idaho students. He's seen on security video trying to gain access to a Costco store. Look at this, but he's refused entry because he's not a member. Now, this is in Clarkston, Washington, which is about 20 miles from Moscow, Idaho, where the murders happened. Kohberger, if you notice here, keeps his left hand inside of his left pocket, presumably because that's the hand that was injured during the homicides. These people have no idea who just walked into their store, right? I mean, think about how everything would come out later. You see him leave there. Now, investigative podcaster Gray Hughes obtained this video, and let's take a listen to Gray describing how Kohberger ends up leaving the parking lot.
So here comes the Elantra. I didn't think that was it, that first one. And here it is. And the car does the same thing as that other vehicle, but here is the Elantra, and it pulls up to the road, and then after this it's going to be heading towards the Kate's Cup of Joe.
Now let's talk about this with high-profile attorney Ben Chu and Joseph Scott Morgan, professor of applied forensics at Jacksonville State University. Good morning to you, gentlemen. Wow, you would have no idea this guy just murdered 4 people before he goes shopping. I mean, it's just so chilling. Professor Joe, thoughts on that moment where we saw him walk into that Costco so casually after doing now what we know he did?
I think that, Julie, by the way, thanks for having me. I think that it's not so much that he walked in, it's that he walked in without understanding the principle of going into one of these club stores like this. He was rejected from entering. He has little self-awareness, apparently, because I'm assuming he's not a member. He doesn't present with an ID or anything like that. So out the door he goes. Could he have been in a frenzy at this particular time, looking for cleaning supplies or looking for things that would aid him along the way to dispose of any kind of physical evidence that he may have had on his person, may have had on any of those clothing? We don't know still, you know, really what happened to any of that, and the weapon as well. This is a very critical time in the investigation when you're looking back at this. It's fascinating that Gray recovered this, and kudos to him, because it really paints a picture of how sinister this is.
It is sinister indeed, Professor. Great thoughts there on whether he might have been looking for cleaning supplies or something. It is very bizarre. I have another clip from Gray Hughes' podcast, and he talks about how apparently Kohberger's next stop was to a coffee shop, but apparently the shop might have been closed because he never winds up there. Let's take a listen.
But here comes Kohberger's white Elantra, driving right by Kate's Cup of Joe. And this is where it does its U-turn. This is exactly how I drove it when I went there. I might have driven, I think the second time I went there, I drove to the left because I didn't want to drive through the Kate's Cup of Joe driveway. It seems kind of weird to go through there and not order something. And there he is. That is Kohberger right there.
Ben Chu, want to get your reaction, please. You've seen a lot over the years throughout your career. This guy, what do you make of him, Kohberger? What exactly do you think we're dealing with this guy?
Well, the fact that despite whatever internal chaos was going on in his twisted sociopathic mind, I was struck by how calm he appeared to be on the outside when he was rejected, as Professor Joe said, at the door. He didn't seem particularly agitated, and then he took a big swig from his water. It just seemed remarkable how casual to the observer he appeared to be. And when he drove, he wasn't speeding, he wasn't running red lights. He just seemed to be totally in control when we know that he really wasn't.
Yes, so well said, Ben. It's like, how can someone be that calm and collected after doing what he did? He goes on, Professor Joe, to a grocery store called Albertson's Groceries, where apparently he buys something. Here's the video of it. You see him walk in. A few minutes after he walks in, he's at a self-checkout. He pays for what he buys, and then he moseys on out of the store. Not a big shopping trip, might have only picked up a couple of little things. Podcaster Gray Hughes thinks that maybe it was a coffee that he buys here. We're not sure. It's hard to tell from the video, but we know since he didn't get it in the last stop. Professor Joe, does it surprise you that somebody who we know acted like a maniac in murdering those 4 people can then behave like a normal person like this and go about his day like everything's just fine?
Unfortunately, Julie, I can no longer say I'm surprised by, just the depth of evil that we see, this detachment that you're seeing with him being able to just kind of float among us as though that, it's just another day in the park. I want to point out something here that I kind of found, that I just picked up on, that I found very interesting. That shirt that he is wearing is covering another shirt. You can actually see it in the Costco loop. He's dressed all in black there, and there's even, if you look at the backside, yeah, that's flared out there. It looks like he's thrown whatever that is, a shirt he's oddly wearing. Is he wearing something else beneath that? And
wow,
if it's a button-up shirt, why is he wearing it buttoned up all the way to the collar, to that top button? It's an odd way of dressing, just when you take a look at him. And look, it's possible to read a lot of things into these things that we see because we want the knowledge. We want to try to understand, these events, and certainly the subsequent events. We had indications that the subject had actually driven back by. Do you remember that, Julie? Driven back by that morning afterwards. And is this nervous energy he's just trying to burn off? I don't know. It is an odd bit of video, though, I have to say.
Definitely. Thank you for pointing that out, Professor, about the shirt underneath. I'm thinking it was just a pants pocket, but when I look at it more closely, after you mention it, it does look like maybe a black T-shirt or some kind of shirt was sticking out underneath that light green that looks like dress shirt.
Yeah, it does. It's just kind of bizarre, and particularly the way he's wearing the shirt. Buttoned all the way up to the top. This is something you'd normally have tucked in. Is he covering anything beneath that? I don't know. Points to ponder, certainly, and very interesting. Maybe I'd like to know, can they correlate anything he picked up in Albertsons with any of these receipts that they recovered? I'd like to hear about that. Was there anything that would have been specifically purchased at Albertsons that they later found in there? And of course, that doesn't tell a tale without a receipt, a time-stamped receipt, because Albertsons might be the only grocery store that's adjacent to him that he has access to. Everybody might use it.
Sure.
I don't know. Kind of fascinating, though, Julie.
Yeah, it is. Great questions you're raising. I will continue talking about this case, of course. We're remembering those victims. And Ben Shu, one last legal question for you, please. When we think about Kohberger, we know he was a weird guy. And at school, he made people uncomfortable, complaints about him from students he was teaching. But it doesn't seem that anything ever rose to the level for something to legally be done to him, for him to be legally removed. I'm sure you probably get that question a lot when people talk to you about this case. Would you just say this is one of those things that unfortunately couldn't have been prevented?
Yeah, Julie, I'm afraid that's right. I mean, we value in this country our freedoms, and there's a big strain of libertarianism, and we don't like Big Brother interfering in our lives. So this, unfortunately, is the cost. Unless there's a real criminal act, these things go undetected and unprosecuted.
Right, right. He seems so normal. We thought he was going to be in academia, like Professor Joe. We thought he was going to be a teacher and a professor someday, and but no, sir. He is a jailbird forever, and he's lucky he didn't get the death penalty. Great conversation with you both. Attorney Ben Chu, Professor Joseph Scott Morgan, thank you so much for the great insight. We'll see you soon.